James Sutton. This is Road to Recovery. My guest today is Ben Westhoff. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks for having me, James.
Now, you have a fascinating book, Fentanyl Inc., and we're right in the midst of an opiate crisis. So it's important that we have people like you that are experts to share some information, so we'll be more enlightened about what is going on with the fentanyl crisis and how can we survive it and how we can help those that are addicted. So can you give us a little bit more background about how we got here?
Yeah, well, fentanyl was invented in the 50s as a hospital drug, and it's still used for that purpose. When men have colonoscopies or women in childbirth are given epidurals. But the fentanyl that's causing the crisis is almost all coming from China. That's illicit fentanyl, and it's being sold, it's shipped to the Mexican cartels, the ingredients for fentanyl, and then they finish it and send it across the border. And fentanyl is in all of our drug supply. Any pill or any powder that's bought on the black market can and does have fentanyl, and so it adulterates meth and cocaine, prescription pills, heroin, of course. And it's a very bad time to take almost any drug.
Yes, I know. We in Montgomery County we found fentanyl in K2, marijuana, even cocaine. And the cocaine was the real puzzling one to me because people usually are buying cocaine because it's a stimulant and they want to stay up, and then to have fentanyl, which is a downer, mixed in, I was like curious to know, was this an accident or was this intentional because the dealer is like hasn't graduated from high school or what?
Yeah, well, I think in the US, we almost have never seen pure cocaine at all. And so it's always been completely adulterated with all kinds of stuff. And I think dealers think that as long as fentanyl, it's giving a reaction. It's a strong drug, and even though it's a downer, I think they can get away with it. But the problem is that it overdoses, makes people overdose and die. Generally, I don't think there's a lot of incentive to adulterate marijuana. I think if you can like see the buds and they look normal and they smell normal, you'll probably be okay. There's been in the media some accounts of marijuana being cut with fentanyl, but I think it's very uncommon.
Okay, okay. And who are the drug users? What's the consumer look like today? Who's using the drugs that we hear about today that's causing people to overdose?
There's two main groups of people who are dying from fentanyl, and the first is young people who go to a party maybe, and they take a pill that someone tells them is a Percocet or a Xanax, Oxycontin, something like that. But really, it's from the black market, and it's been cut with fentanyl. And we hear about, especially young people dying from these fake pills a lot. The second group is more likely to die from fentanyl, and that's people living on kind of the edges of society, street people, homeless people, people that are in and out of the justice system. And they are, sometimes these people have been addicted to heroin for many, many years, and they always, lived, but now they take one dose that's cut with fentanyl and they overdose and die the first time.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing that in Montgomery County in the DC area too. As a matter of fact, the jail that I work at, we started training inmates with Narcan before they're discharged, before they're released, and also giving them option to, if they had a history of opiate use, they could get a Vivitrol shot free before they left the jail because so many people were dying because their tolerance had dropped. While they were incarcerated, the tolerance had dropped. So when they get out, they want to celebrate, that they're out now, they're free. So let's, get high, and they shoot, what they think is their normal shot. and it's like, 100 times stronger than what they expect, and they die, unfortunately. So we've been doing that, but we've had
Yeah,
a few takers.
yeah, I mean, I've heard that people getting out of prison are 20 times, 25 times or more likely to overdose and die for just the reasons you're talking about. And I'm a big fan of the Vivitrol shot. I'm actually making a documentary about Vivitrol because it is underused, and I think it is really a great option for people just getting out of prison because you have to be detoxed from opioids to take it. And so people, yeah, it's like an insurance policy or a vaccine for people right when they get out of prison. And it doesn't give you that feeling, that high feeling. It's not gonna give you that buzzed feeling like with methadone or Suboxone. But it's a good tool for people who really want to quit. Here, I don't know if you knew this, but Vivitrol, that's the brand name for the shot, and the drug is called naltrexone. And naltrexone and Narcan are actually almost exactly the same molecule. It's the same drug basically, except that Narcan is used to revive people who have overdosed, and naltrexone is used to stop people from overdosing.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you. And now let's think about the source of where is this fentanyl coming from? Because I've had people, in treatment tell me that they had the fentanyl patch, and my daughter had cancer, and I had to put the patch on her, and it had different strengths, 100, 25. But people have told me that they have eaten, they have chewed it, they've smoked it, they've done all kinds of things to get the gel into them. And I was like saying, oh man, that's terrible. But this fentanyl that's killing people is the one coming from China. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's the exact same chemical. If you get it from a hospital or from a patch or from a lollipop or whatever, or if you're buying it on the street, it's the same fentanyl. The problem is that, in hospitals, they have trained anesthesiologists, people that are measuring the dose perfectly. And fentanyl can be safe if it's given in the right dose, but the kind people are getting on the street, that comes from China originally. And so for my book Fentanyl Inc., I actually went undercover inside a drug lab in Shanghai, and I saw where they were making different types of fentanyl as well as different types of K2 and spice, also known as synthetic marijuana. It was just shocking because fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin, yet they were making these gigantic quantities. I was saying that it's like the end of the movie Scarface, where he's got those huge piles of cocaine,
Right.
and that this lab in China made that look like child's play. There were these giant piles everywhere of these different types of fentanyl and K2 and spice, and it just speaks to the giant market there is for these drugs all across the world.
Right. Now, can you tell us why China doesn't stop the fentanyl, from leaving there if it's so dangerous?
Well, China doesn't really have a problem with these drugs for its own citizens. So, like, nobody much in China is using fentanyl or anything like that. So China's police crack down on the drugs that Chinese people use, like meth and heroin, and they haven't done a very good job of stopping the export of these drugs. And so it's been a big sticking point with the U.S. They've come around. They banned all the fentanyl products finally a few years ago. But the problem is they don't have enough police. They don't have enough enforcement to really enforce these laws. And there's a financial motivation to not crack down on this industry as well. And so it continues to be a really big sticking point between the U.S. and China.
Right. Okay. And on our end, why is it that we can't stop the inflow of, fentanyl?
Well, it comes from China to Mexico, and then the Mexican cartels bring it across the border. But, fentanyl is just so potent and so small, such a small amount is necessary. So we couldn't even stop heroin from getting across the border before, and you need just 1 pound of heroin, 1 pound of fentanyl is equal to 50 pounds of heroin. And so there's all these ways to smuggle these drugs, underground tunnels, through the ports of entry, and cars with, secret compartments, and trucks and drones. And I was saying, I even I even heard about a guy on a surfboard who was like a drug mule bringing fentanyl around the wall out in the ocean on a surfboard. So there's a million and one ways to bring these drugs across.
Right. Yeah, I've seen in movies, and the mules, and I've read where mules that swallow drugs and then it burst in their stomach and they died in the airport and things like that. But it's the first time I ever heard about a surfboard mule. That's like it's a new one on me.
Yeah, I mean, they're incredibly inventive, the drugs will always find a way in somehow.
Right. Yeah, and and a lot of, because I get a lot of prison news too. A lot of prisons are using the drone. The inmates are using drones to smuggle drugs into the prisons too. And as a matter of fact, fentanyl is one of the drugs that have shown up in the prison system. I even had one case years ago where one of the drug sniffing dogs, he sniffed fentanyl and went out. Because fentanyl had been smuggled, because like you said, it's such a small amount, was smuggled into a prison in Oregon, I think. And the dog had found it and went and, OD'd.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to think about it too. It's like we can't stop drugs from getting into a prison, so how are we going to stop them from getting into a whole country?
Right, right. So now I wanted to like change speeds a little bit, not really, but it's still, can you explain what a NPS is, a designer drug?
NPS stands for new psychoactive substance. So basically, throughout human history, there were only a handful of different drugs that people consumed, and they almost all came from, plants like magic mushrooms or marijuana or the cactus, mescaline, things like that. Cocaine comes from a plant, heroin comes from a plant, or else sometimes drugs come from animals. Like there's a certain toad you can lick to have a
Yeah,
psychedelic trip, if you're into that.
yeah. I saw
Uh,
that Nigeria, they do that.
okay, yeah. But in recent years, in the last decade or so, there's been this explosion of new drugs, and there's hundreds of new drugs every year now, and they come from these labs in China, and the chemists are manipulating molecules. So they like take a molecule of a known drug and they just tweak it just a little bit. So now you have something that's a different drug and it's technically legal, but it still will have some sort of effect. And these new drugs, fentanyl is the most famous of these new psychoactive substances, but K2 and spice are another example. Bath salts, all these whenever you hear about a new crazy drug in the news, it's usually an NPS.
Right. Yeah, I had one case years ago, and that was probably the first time, other than fentanyl, that I heard about another one of the designer drugs, the NPS, other than reading your book. I had a guy who was in drug court, as a matter of fact, and he had a history of opiate use, and what he had done, he had told them that he was going to have some work done on his teeth, so they took him off of Vivitrol. So that was his
Oh,
opportunity to use, right? So that's what they'll try to figure out, how can I possibly come off the Vivitrol so that I can use some opiates, right? And he told me that he bought something online for $10 a gram called N something, right? He said it was $10 a gram, and a tenth of a gram he OD'd. Unfortunately, it was somebody else with him who had Narcan, and they brought him back for him to tell me the story, right? So I said, so you're saying that $1 $1 worth of this chemical, you OD. So with that kind of incentive, you know, an addict would jump on, you know, opportunity like that, you know, to be able to OD for $1, you know. So that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and you can buy these drugs off the dark web very easily. So it's a really scary situation out there.
Right. So then we're going to take a pause for the cause and take a break for one moment for a commercial, and we'll be right back with Ben Westhoff.
A lethal dose is in here. Who gets it, I won't know.
Scary that it can be put into anything, and we can't even see it or notice it.
This is James Sutton on Road to Recovery with my guest today, Ben Westhoff. So Ben, we were just talking about what was the NPS, and you were enlightening us about a lot of the drugs, K2 and fentanyl and some of the designer drugs. So, and I told you that I talked to people in the Army, and they were saying that K2 was really popular in the Army. They were having a big problem with K2 because it was beating the urine screens. A lot of the Army and justice system, they didn't test for K2 originally, you know, so they would like switch from marijuana to K2.
Yeah, K2 and spice are sometimes known as synthetic marijuana. So basically, you know, when you smoke weed, it's like very mellow. But these new drugs, K2 and spice, is like, you know, it can make you go crazy. It's like supercharged, and you see videos of people losing their minds. But the reason people take them often is because, like you said, they can evade employers' drug screenings or prison drug screenings or whatever the case. And so that's the same thing with all of these new drugs coming out. You know, they're so new that they haven't even had time to develop a drug screening for them. So they have a saying that, like, when you ban one drug, a new, like, more potent, more dangerous one will take its place. And that's the same thing with heroin, because fentanyl is 50 times stronger, you know, and that's been proven right.
Right. And I think I read it in your book, as a matter of fact, that the K2 withdrawal was worse than the fentanyl withdrawal. Some people that you had interviewed said that.
Yeah, someone I talked to said that. You know, it's different for everybody, but I think a lot of times people use one drug to like mask the symptoms of withdrawal for another one. So there's a lot of benzos on the street, you know, like Xanax and Valium and knockoffs of those. And people combine those with opioids like fentanyl to try to like stave off the withdrawal. But usually it just ends up making the whole thing worse, and they pass out for 18 hours at a time, or they wake up and don't even remember what they did. You know, one guy, like, I heard about, crashed his car. He like got out of the car and like went into this guy's house and stole his like fishing rods for some reason, and he doesn't even fish. And he woke up in jail, and he said they told him this whole story and he didn't remember any of it.
Right. Yeah, we have newspaper articles in our area around DC all the time of somebody smoking K2 and then on top of a police car naked, you know, screaming and stuff, and they don't remember later on, you know, that they even did that. They're in a blackout mode, you know.
Yeah. Well, you were asking about the drug culture, and you know, in some ways it's the same as it's been, that the Mexican cartels are supplying the street dealers with the most common hard drugs, which are heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, and meth. But then there's this whole crop of new drugs that people are buying off the dark web, and these are these hundreds of new psychoactive substances we've been talking about. So they have like knockoff LSD, you know, knockoff marijuana, knockoff cocaine, knockoff ecstasy, things like that. And there are people called psychonauts who, what they do is for fun, they try brand new drugs that have never been tried by anyone really. And so they have no idea what the effect is going to be. And obviously this is very dangerous.
Pretty much.
But there's also these dark websites that are selling them even have like Amazon ratings. So like people, they're selling these crazy new drugs, and then people take them and then give a rating, and they say like, this is what it says. This isn't what it says it was. So in a way, some people see these sites as a form of harm reduction if they're filtering out the dangerous dealers. But to all of that, if you're going to do something like that, you've got to use a drug checking kit. And they have really advanced kits now where you can really tell exactly what you have. And one company I always recommend is called the Bunk Police, bunkpolice.com. And they sell these pretty cheap and easy to use kits where, you get something, you think it's LSD, you can check to see if it really is LSD, or whatever.
Okay. And we do that in Montgomery County, not that kit, but with fentanyl. We have fentanyl strips that we give out with harm reduction in our, needle exchange programs where a person can test whatever they're buying to see if fentanyl is in it or how much. And matter of fact, now everything it might be 100% fentanyl on the street nowadays, and so
yeah, that's critical. That's absolutely critical. Any pill, any powder, you've got to check it with those fentanyl test strips.
Right. So, I'm glad that we have that in Montgomery County. What about the new dealer? Who are the new dealers today? What do they look like?
Well, they are different, in every part of the country. And here in St. Louis, we've got a lot of sort of like criminal gangs that are kind of locally based. Out in West Virginia, they've got these like hillbilly white families, there's like in New York, I think it's mostly Dominicans. In California, there might be the MS-13 gangs. But a lot of people, aren't even buying from street dealers anymore. Like I said, you can buy off Snapchat and all these different apps. The more they try to crack down on, Facebook, Instagram, people selling drugs on these apps, they use all these secret code words. And the dark web, people have big bundles of drugs arriving right to their doors. So, in some ways, things are the same as they've always been, but in other ways, you don't even have to leave your house anymore.
Yeah, from reading your book, I was really fascinated about that home delivery because I'm from DC. So I'm used to a street market, right? And when I came to Montgomery County with a different kind of, relationship where people there's not like a street where you drive down like in Baltimore or DC or New York and people will come to your car, or it's a market, it's a drug market where you can go and, you see lines of people, and Montgomery County is a little different in the way that, drugs are distributed and people buy. And then from reading your book, I saw that it's like probably with COVID, it was even more home deliveries going on all over the world, or using the dark web and things like that.
Yeah, I think like in some ways it's the worst time ever to be a drug user because anything can be cut with fentanyl and can kill you. But in other ways, it's, the best time because you have all these advanced drug checking kits, and there is a way now to be sure that what you're getting, you just have to like put the time in beforehand. The problem is a lot of drug users are really impulsive, and if you're just going out down the street and going to some, location and buying something, that the odds are that it's cut with fentanyl are just overwhelmingly high.
Okay. So Ben, how does this all fit into our public health crisis? What can we do?
Yeah, well, I think the two most important things are, first of all, we need education. And, I saw this article about eighth graders in Arizona, and 50% of them had never even heard of fentanyl before. And like I said, people think that because it's a pill, it looks like it would come from the pharmacy. It looks just like something in your parents' medicine cabinet, that it should be safe. People need to be educated about what these new drugs are, like fentanyl. The second thing we need to do is really up the medication assisted treatment, the access, and the affordability. Something like 85% of people who with opioid use disorder don't have access or aren't using medication assisted treatment. And so, we're lucky that we have these three good drugs to help people in their recovery from opioids. We talked about the Vivitrol shot, and there's methadone and buprenorphine, also known as Suboxone.
Right.
And but we need to do greater outreach to underserved communities. And there are these clinics, but they tend to be in wealthier neighborhoods or whiter neighborhoods. And we need to do more outreach, like it sounds like you're doing with people in prison. Bad drug use and poverty are very intertwined, and it has to be holistic. You can't just give someone some meds and send them on their way. It has to be in tied with, grouped in with housing, with psychiatric care. People need to be in counseling. You need to tie in job training, job possibilities, because once people really have something to live for, they've got good work, they've got good relationship with their family, their kids, then they're much more likely to be able to beat opioid use disorder, to beat addiction, than if you're just giving them, some pills.
Right. Thank you. And it's kind of like what we do with Tree of Hope, with the nonprofit that I work with. What we're peers, right? And we're on the front lines, trying to provide support for people in recovery and people in active addiction, to get them in recovery and do exactly what you said. We have a holistic approach, not just sobriety, but decent housing, safe housing, opportunities for employment or education, connection with spirituality, and, reuniting with their family. So exactly what you're talking about is what we're trying to do, with this program: reduce stigma and, provide an opportunity for people leaving prison and people leaving treatment to integrate into the community and be, a contributing element, rather than something scorned,
Yeah, well, it sounds like you have a great program. That's definitely the way to go about it.
Right. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm almost through with Fentanyl Inc., but your original gangster book is so thick. I gave it to one of the guys in the prison that works with the gangs, right? I told him it would be a good reference for him to use, and he has to give it back to me next week.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that one's about West Coast hip hop, NWA and Tupac and everything. So,
Right.
yeah, I do have a big audience in prison. I'm often told that's where most of my fans are.
Well, except for me, I'm on the street. All right, I'm out. So thank you again for being with us.
All right. Well, thank you, James.
So this is James Sutton on Road to Recovery. My guest today was Ben Westhoff, investigative journalist who is the author of Fentanyl Inc. So check it out, and I'll see you on the road to recovery.